Hello everyone from Southern California. I'm A.G. Bilig, published author and founder of Self-Publishing Mastery, and I welcome you to a new episode of the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks. Today's episode is all about writing the writing craft. We are going to talk about mindset and how it influences your creativity. I'm going to recommend two books which I personally use to enhance my prose. And of course, we have a very special guest today. His name is Gerald Everett Jones. He's an award-winning author of thriller and mysteries. He's also a book shepherd and an author coach, and the founder of the Get Published radio show. Before we dive into our today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you want to get updates about new episodes. Please don't forget to go to selfpublishingmastery.com and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. You will also get a welcome bonus. It's a surprise. I won't tell you what it is. You need to go there. I have two recommendations for you, two great online events. One of them is happening October 24th through 25th, and it's called the Book Fest. It's the fall edition. The first edition happened earlier this year in spring. So this amazing two-day event will have keynote speeches and panels and a reading room and live author chat, which I will be moderating together with Gerald Everett Jones, our guest today. And also on October 25th, it will have a special track dedicated to authors with the panels, which will help you enhance your writing craft and hone your book marketing skills. So the festival will be streaming live on YouTube. So this is one event, and the other event I want to recommend to you is a festival that happened earlier this year in September, and I was part of it. I did a workshop on how to use mindfulness tools to increase your creativity and productivity, and the name is the International Dublin Writers Festival. And the good thing about what is happening right now and all these online events is that if we miss them as they are happening, then we can always go back and access them because they are online. So the video content of the International Dublin Writers Festival is still available through December 31st, and you can access it by going to internationaldublinwritersfestival.com. I'll put the link in the video description so you can check it out. So these are my two recommendations. And now let's get on with the show and talk about mindset. I'm going to preface my short talk on mindset with a real story that happened to me. So if you watched the previous videos, you may be already familiar with how I got my contract with the publisher back in 2012. It was absolutely, I would say by accident, but it wasn't an accident. I think it was supposed to happen. But back then I didn't have a literary agent. I didn't have any connection in the publishing world. I was still living in Romania, my home country back then. And I just went to the London Book Fair and submitted my manuscript to a small publisher from the UK, the Isle of Man. And 2 days later, they offered me a book deal. And that was fantastic. Imagine I was over the moon. I couldn't believe that it was so easy to get that contract when everybody in the industry, and especially in Romania, was saying that it is impossible to do that, especially for someone living in a small Eastern European country. But it happened to me. And I guess one of the reasons it happened to me, it was that when I left Bucharest, I had this mindset that I'm going to go to the London Book Fair and I'm not going to come back empty-handed. I'm going to have at least a contract with a literary agent. And because, I was excited about my manuscript, I was sure there was something valuable in it. I was sure that there was something in it that would make people smile and cry and change their lives for the better. So I had this mindset of success. But of course, like anybody else in my childhood and then later in my teenage years, I kind of acquired some limiting beliefs that made me doubt myself, that made me doubt that life is supporting me all the time, that made me doubt my talent. So once I returned back home, I set up a schedule with my editor at MP Publishing to go over Skype meeting and discuss the manuscript and the changes that needed to be made. And surprisingly, although I wasn't a native speaker, those changes were really minor. So you can imagine for a young woman at her first book with a publisher, basically those meetings, those Skype calls with my editor, they were like the sun to me, what sun is to the earth. They were the centerpiece of my whole life. So I would build my day around that meeting. And when I would get like 2 hours or 3 hours before the meeting, when I would get an email from the editor saying, oh, I'm sorry, something came up and we need to reschedule. You know, I felt like I was drowning. I felt like life was going out of me. It was really heartbreaking. And then all kind of negative thoughts came to me, like, oh, this isn't going to happen. Why this is happening to me? This will not work out. So I had all these doubts that this book would actually be a success, overcoming me. And in the end, what happened was that my book was published in November the same year, but the editorial manager of MP Publishing, and she was also my editor, the one who believed in me, she left the company. And then all the book marketing they were supposed to do for Four Doors and Other Stories, ironically, with the PR agency in LA, close to where I live now, that never happened. So you can see the difference in mindset. So when I went to the London Book Fair, I felt like, yes, I can conquer the world. But then when I met the slight bump in the road, all that confidence that I had kind of crumbled, and I ended up with a published book, but which didn't perform the way I thought it would. Um, so probably if my mindset would have been different, if I had stayed positive and expected the best outcome, the outcome would have been different. So when you write and when you decide to fully immerse yourself in this journey of becoming an author, especially a full-time author, if you feel that you have many books inside of you, the mindset is really important. And I'm currently reading a book written by Louise Hay. The name is The Power Within You. And she's telling an interesting story about how before she gets inside her car, she fills her car with love. And then she imagines that on her way, she would encounter only wonderful, polite, calm drivers. In the morning or afternoon or whenever you write, when you sit in front of your computer, you need to um, feel that moment, feel your computer, feel the page with your love and your passion and enjoyment for writing. If you're going to sit in front of a computer and look at writing as something that you need to do, as a goal to accomplish, as something that's putting a burden on your shoulders, that's the energy you're going to put into your book, and that's not going to help you to be creative. You know, on the contrary, it will hinder your creativity. But if you sit down at your computer and think, oh, this is such a wonderful opportunity to create a new world, to create people. In a way, you're a god, because you're creating something out of nothing. and it allows you to bring to life something that doesn't exist right now. So if you're going to enjoy that process and immerse yourself in your process, and then if you're going to think about the way your writing is going to affect the readers, if you can imagine how your book is going to make them laugh or cry with joy, or give them hope, or simply entertain them, then all this energy will create a positive environment that will only enhance your creativity and will unleash it. And you will do it with so much joy that it will become contagious, especially if you're starting out. And when you look at the amazing authors that are already out there, you may feel like, oh, who am I to write a book? But then I want to tell you that I just looked 2 days ago at the Publishers Weekly website, and I saw two names, two first-time authors who signed six-figure deals with publishers, first-time authors. So basically, they got the deal for their first book. Trust your talent, trust your gut that tells you you need to write this book. And you need to write this book because people need it. And I know there are millions of books out there, but there are billions of people. And I think there is enough room on the market for every one of us. And I think every one of us has a target audience. Any one of us has a readership that's out there waiting for our books. So don't doubt yourself. And when you doubt yourself, and I doubt myself, just immerse yourself in the joy of writing and creating and being really passionate and enthusiastic about it. And I promise you, it will pay off. Okay, so what's our goal today in this episode? To become better writers, right? So I promised you I would recommend two books that I personally use when I self-edit my novels. One of them is called The Emotion Thesaurus, a writer's guide to character expression, and is written by Angela Ackerman and Becca Pucklist. So this book is a great companion when you write your book, because it actually lists the most frequent human emotions. So the book gives you the definition of the emotion. So for example, in shame's case is the feeling that arises from a dishonorable or improper act, disgrace. And then it gives you a list of physical signals and behaviors. So for shame, you have cheeks that burn, crumpling onto a chair or sofa, muttering words, stuff like that. And actually the list for physical signals and behaviors for shame is pretty long. And then of course, when we feel a strong emotion, we also have internal sensations. And in case of shame, we can have weak knees or body tremors. And we have mental responses, which can be self-loathing, berating oneself, anger, and disgust. So all this is here, listed in the book under the shame entry. So the book lists not only negative emotions such as shame and anger and irritation and jealousy, but also love, peacefulness. So instead of saying, oh, Rebecca was angry, by using this book, you can make sure that you are going to use a gesture, or you're going to be able to tell something about how she feels internally that will actually show people that she's angry instead of saying that she is angry. So the other book that's going to help you enhance your writing, and that's a pretty outstanding companion when you self-edit your book before you send it to a professional editor, is this one. So it's called 1,000 Strong Verbs for Fiction Writers, and is written by Valerie Howard. In this book, you're going to find alternatives for verbs such as ask, attack, bend, bite, bother, cry, confuse, cover, eat, embrace. And of course, you can find it on Amazon, and you will also find the link in the video description. And I hope both books will help you. And please don't hesitate to write to us or leave a comment and tell us if you try these books and they helped you, or if you have recommendations in terms of books on self-publishing or the writing craft that helped you become a better writer. And now it's time to get to the last part of our show today and meet Gerald Everett Jones, who's going to share with you the secrets that made him an award-winning author. Well, finally, here we are together with our very special guest today. His name is Gerald Everett Jones. He's a prolific author. He's an award-winning author. He's an author coach. He did ghostwriting and co-writing, and he's the host and the founder of the Get Published radio show. Did I miss anything, Gerald? Hello and welcome.
Oh, there's only 30 years of my resume you've left out, but that's fine. It's not particularly interesting. Lovely to be with you again, AG.
It's great to have you here. Gerald and I have, if we think 3 years or 4 years back, we have a history together already.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I remember.
You were just off the boat or just off the plane.
Yeah, you taught me that idiom of the boat. I went to the LA Festival of Books, and here it was, the Independent Writers of Southern California booth, and Gerald was there. And we started a conversation, and then I found out about one of their meetings, and I went there just to meet Gerald again, because I thought, oh, this guy is so interesting. This guy knows so much. I need to connect with him and learn more about him. And then I started listening to the podcast, to the Get Published radio show. I was a guest on your podcast, and then I started reading his books. And so we've been in touch for all these years, and he was also one of our top guests on the Self-Publishing Mastery Summit 2 years ago, and I'm sure things will continue.
Well, as we introduced the show, we would say, here's your host, Gerald Everett Jones. He has the answers because he's made all the mistakes himself.
Right.
And in fact, yes, I was involved with the internet when it was blue screens. I had an extensive background in computer graphics back when, it took a computer the size of a room to make a business slide. And then I wrote a lot about what was Harvard graphics, then it became PowerPoint, whatever. But also, more to the point, this whole phenomenon of self-publishing, we're living at the time, it's like living during the invention of the printing press. I mean, this is really epic making. And it was interesting. I might allude a couple of times to having taken master classes with, these online classes with famous authors. And one that was really helpful was Dan Brown. I might talk about that in a minute. Because I didn't really expect to get anything new from him. Of course I did. But, I also took James Patterson's master classes, master mystery thriller writer. And it was interesting to me that he was talking about, okay, you need an agent, how to get an agent, here's how to query an agent, here's what publishers want. And I'm thinking, okay, Jim.
Just a buddy of yours.
Got your agent in 1974. I looked it up. Okay. The chances of somebody actually querying an agent in the fiction space and getting a book deal, especially if it happens to be your first book, is, with what, 1 million books being published every year and some huge portion of those being self-published, the noise level is just astounding. And what I like to compare it to is the music business. And this was actually true when I was in computer graphics as well. The music business came first with online because its bandwidth is the narrowest. Okay, you could actually download a song back when it took 5 minutes to download a song. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what was the formula for success in the music business? Well, suddenly the labels had no more, they called them A&R men, okay, talent scouts. Mm-hmm. They just started watching clicks. You know, who's getting the most clicks? Well, you know, you get 1 million clicks. It's, hey, kid, how'd you like to go on tour? Okay, the record labels did not go away. They're still there, okay? But they're only taking people who are on a level of, we'll invest $5 million in your next world tour. Okay, they're not building careers. Careers are being built on YouTube and iTunes, and just the same way that self-published authors are building their careers now. And an example that I like to use, I don't know if you've ever heard the jazz orchestra Pink Martini.
Yeah, sure.
But
I've seen them in concert. Yeah.
Has never been with a major record mm-hmm. label. They self-publish all their mm-hmm. stuff. They mm-hmm. own their own label. And where did I hear them first? I heard them New Year's Eve at Disney Hall. Mm-hmm. Well, somehow they got themselves booked into Disney Hall. Yeah. Okay, so they must be doing something right. And if you go on YouTube and you look at the world tours of Pink Martini, they're in Munich, they're in Australia, they're in Japan, and they've got fans all over the world. So sure. Here's an interesting model of, and I've got my recent mystery series here in the background, Preacher Finds a Corpse and Preacher Fakes a Miracle.
That's a double award-winning book, right?
Well, Preacher Finds a Corpse, the first one, yes, won 2 awards, and then I won another one for literary fiction, Clifford Spiral, and then I actually won one in the business book space. That was all this year. So it's funny because our colleague Gary Young says, "Yeah, that's 4 and counting." So because there's still some that haven't announced. So we'll see what happens. But yes, I did one satire series years ago, Rollo Hemphill Misadventures. And that was about a young man failing upward. They were kind of reverse romantic comedies, how to fall out of love, I don't know, something like that.
So I want to say we are here today, as you can already tell. I mean, Gerald knows a lot about self-publishing because he's also helping authors who are choosing this path. And for sure, we are going to have him back on the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks to discuss more self-publishing and what you can do to market your book and how you can get to that stage where a big publisher will come to you and say, "Hey, I want to give you a contract," and you will say, "No, I don't want it because I'm already making that much money." That
making too much money.
Yeah, why would I share why would I give you 50% of my royalties? But today we have a really special topic for you. That's something that not many people talk about. Because not many people are really aware and they don't know how to talk about it, I guess. And it's related to your writing craft, and it's related to how you can use your mind, and particularly your subconscious mind, to write the books you want to write. Because Gerald knows about it, and because that's something he's using to write that book you see there, his books and that books get awards.
It's something I'm discovering. Uh-huh. And it's a process of discovery, because I wrote a blog post about this last week. I wrote a lot of business books. My professional writing career was primarily business and technical books, especially how-to computer books, mm-hmm. back when you actually needed books, mm-hmm. When the help systems weren't so good and the user interfaces weren't so easy. But I would write for publishers, and they would assign an editor, and I would mm-hmm. have an outline, and I would have 6 bullet mm-hmm. points for every chapter, and I had to turn in 2 chapters a week. And if I did not hit every one of those bullet points, I got my wrist slapped. Okay. So it's not that I don't know how to write to outlines, but one of the things I found about writing mystery thrillers, and I'll hark back to these master classes with Dan Brown. I mean, one thing about Dan Brown is he is noted as a guy who knows how to write page turns. And
yeah,
having read quite a few of his novels, I thought, okay, it must have to do with threat. Okay, we're always putting the hero and his girlfriend du jour, under, they're in a room that's too small. The place is about to flood. Something's about to explode. And it turned out that that's not his formula. I mean, certainly that's how he has paid off his formula at times. But his formula is this. And this opened a door for me. He said, what you want to do, keep people turning pages, is you have to keep making promises.
Interesting. Probably that's what hooked me up on the Da Vinci's Code. I'm not a
absolutely.
I'm not a regular mystery and thriller reader. But I heard a hype around that book, and I said I need to read it. So I read it in English, and I was like, I couldn't stop.
It's curiosity, and the way that it's different from writing to an outline, for example, is in a business book. If you introduce a new term, the absolute hard and fast rule is you must define it on first use. Okay, so the reader knows. And often in a scholarly book, you'll have an abstract at the top of a chapter that's going to tell you everything that happens in the chapter and, how the chapter turns out, what the conclusion is. Here it is, paragraph right at the top. And if you're studying for a test, just read all the abstracts of all the chapters and you're going to be in good shape.
Right.
Well, in a mystery or in a thriller, you might introduce something that you introduce it in a way that it's a minor detail. Okay, here's a half a dozen objects on the person's desk. One of those is going to be significant. Well, I'm not going to tell you how significant it is when you first see it. I'm not even going to let you know that it's significant. The thing that I will say, though, about writing from the subconscious is, if as a writer I have allowed myself to just describe what there is on the desk, I don't know what's significant either.
Okay.
And there are any number of times that I've put in details where, he's got red hair. And I don't know why I put it in. I don't know why I associated with that character. And yet 3 chapters later, another character is describing something that had happened to her, and he says, "Yeah, this deputy walked in, young guy. All I remember is his uniform." And Evan says, "Did he have red hair?"
Yeah.
Well, that turns out to be that's the one guy in town, the one sheriff's deputy that Evan knows pretty well, and he knows not to trust him. Okay, well, suddenly we're linked up. And I found my mind doing this to me over and over again, where, I wanted to know where it was going. And if I didn't know where I was going, and then it ultimately paid off, it was very pleasing to me. And I realized that, wow, the reader should get a kick out of it too, because if I didn't see it coming, maybe they didn't either. Yeah. So on both of these books, I always have about a dozen beta readers, and they're usually writer colleagues, and they tend to be, they're a pretty tough crowd because they know the trade, and almost uniformly they've told me, well, I really didn't know what was going until the last page, and I said, I didn't know what was going to happen until the last page. So that is one of the ways you do it.
Gerald, I'd like to stop a little bit and explain what is this subconscious mind, because maybe not everyone, I'm sure everyone heard subconscious mind. Everyone is familiar with these 2 words, but maybe we can explain.
Well, that actually is a fairly technical explanation, I would say, because the distinction between subconscious and unconscious is something that you're going to find even clinicians disagreeing about. Okay. Now, for sure, portions of your mind that are unconscious are making your heart beat. Okay. So it's pretty clear that, you're not going to be able to get in there and tell your heart when to beat. So I think we can put that definition aside. However, the psychologist Carl Jung wrote extensively about what he called the collective unconscious, and by that he meant the collected wisdom of the entire human race, expressed, and again, back to Dan Brown, expressed at times in primitive symbols, in imagery, and in experiences that evoke archetypal seminal emotions. So there's a great deal of disagreement about whether that even exists. Okay. Subconscious mind, though, is the theory of the subconscious is that it's a portion of your mind that really retains just about everything. And your conscious mind is from moment to moment censoring the outputs from that and only selecting the things that are useful at this particular time. Now, the psychologist Milton Erickson, who was noted to be a hypnotist, he was noted as a father of neurolinguistic programming, but what a lot of people, I think, don't appreciate about him is that what he really believed in was the power of storytelling. And people who were patients, clients, would come to him with issues, and he would sit in a darkened room with them, and he'd listen to them a bit, and then he'd tell them a story. And it would be only a few minutes long. And most of them could not see any connection between, if somebody gave you some teacher said, well, let me give you an analogy. Let me give you an illustration. It really wouldn't take too much imagination for you to know why they picked that story. In Erickson's case, there seemed to be no connection whatever. And these people would walk out and they'd go, what a fake, it's like, why did I waste my money? And then 2 weeks later, they'd come back and somehow their symptoms had disappeared. Now, no one, even Erickson's fellow practitioners, could explain how he came up with these stories. It was intuitive. And there's a book called My Voice Will Go With You, which was written by his colleague Sidney Rosen, which tries to, now Erickson's passed away, so you can't ask him, okay? But Rosen tried to explain why some of these stories worked. But the main thing about Erickson was he believed that the story became more powerful after you think you've forgotten it.
Oh, I see. Okay,
because then your conscious mind gets out of the way. Any judgments that you're making, and your subconscious just can work on you. Now, when I've talked to writers groups about historical fiction, and the idea that historical fiction is all about today. Well, of course, if it's written by people today and they think they know what was going on in the Gilded Age, well, they didn't really, because they know about the internet and those people didn't. They had cell phones, those people didn't. And your mind is skewed certain ways, in ways that you don't appreciate necessarily, the way theirs weren't. There was an era of horse-drawn carriages and gas lamps, and electricity was only a novelty, and a few people had telephones. So, but the thing about that is, in terms of forgetting stories, a lot of us have read Moby Dick. We had to read it as that was part of our high school curriculum. Right. And if not Moby Dick, Great Expectations or Huckleberry Finn or one of those. Okay. Now, if I were to sit you down for any of those books, and I would say, tell me the story.
It would be hard.
Well, there was a white whale, and there was the captain who was trying to kill it, and there was this guy named Starbuck, and I think he had a chain of coffee stores. I mean, you don't really know. You can't really say too much. But I would submit to you that Moby Dick is is affecting you, if you read it, or if you even had a lesson on it, is affecting you in ways today that you'll never be able to express. And this is true of what we would call the canon of Western literature, okay, which includes Bible stories, Greek mythology, every story we were ever told. And there is a branch of linguistics, or actually literary analysis, called semiotics. Roland Barthes and Noam Chomsky's involved in that as well. And this was highlighted in Jeffrey Eugenides' novel, The Marriage Plot. And these were kids at Brown University who were studying semiotics. That was part of the plot. But semiotics basically held, at least according to Eugenides, that we would not really know love, romantic love, unless we had read stories about it, unless we'd been taught through literature. And I remember going through the ruins of Ephesus in Turkey, which is, was basically a Greek society once upon a time.
Yes.
And the tour guide said, yes, kissing, they did not know this experience. It was, what? And of course, there was a whole theory that it wasn't until the Italian Renaissance that kissing became a social custom, at least, kissing on the lips. So now that I don't know, I don't know the answer to that debate.
Yeah.
but again, the power of storytelling, the idea that your subconscious is trying to express something.
Yeah.
And why do writers write? And if you're a career writer, the answer probably is because you can't do anything else.
Yeah, true.
You can't not. You're going to want to express yourself in some way or other, and it would be true if you played clarinet or trombone or you were an opera singer or whatever. I mean, if that is the means of expression that you have found connects the most with your soul, you can't help but do it. I mean, it'd be great if people paid you, but they may not.
Well, sometimes they may.
They may not.
So how can writers consciously use their subconscious mind when they write?
Well, actually, I got a story about that too. Once upon a time, I won an award for an unpublished or an unshot, unsold screenplay, Mr. Ballpoint, which now is a book. I made it into a book, but it still isn't a movie. But I won an award for it, and this was an independent feature project, which is now called Film Independent. And the prize was a mentoring class. So with a dozen other talented award winners, I studied with lead David Zlotov for about 6 months. Now, he is the guy who invented MacGyver. And colorful character, wore Hemingway-style jackets, stepped outside to chain smoke. But one of the things Lee said was, the story he told was, he says, I've never been able to stare at a blank page. He says, I can't write an outline. I can't get unstuck. He said, and he says, the thing I found was, before I had an office, before I could afford an office, I would go to Santa Monica Public Library, and I would sit there, and it was quiet. I'd try to concentrate. He said, but even there in the quiet, table to myself, pad in front of me, he said, couldn't write a word. He said, but what I would do is I would ask myself a question. He said, then I would walk. So I had, if I walked aimlessly in the library, I'd get thrown out because they think I was a homeless person. So I had to look like I would say, okay, I'm going to go over to 19th century history. Okay. So, I mean, I would have a goal, but he said, I would go over there and I would take my time and I'd look around on the shelf. And he said, but again, I had this question in mind, but I wouldn't be obsessing about it. But he said, by the time I got around the library and got back to my seat and sat down, he said, I'd have something. I might. And he said, so people would say, well, you don't go to the library anymore. What do you do today? He says, I have an office to myself. I turn up my stereo and I dance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's a secret. I presume he doesn't mind my telling that story, but again, it's a matter of turning off the censoring mind. And that old expression, why don't you just sleep on it? That's really good literal advice. If you are stumped, or or the people who say, it came to me in the shower. Well, why did it come to you? The reason it came to you in the shower is that the sound of the shower is white noise. It is all the frequencies it's like white light. Okay. It's all the frequencies mixed together. And for whatever reason that somehow unlocks your brain, things are going to come to you. And you could buy a white noise machine and you could plug your headphones in. And I guarantee you, if you plug yourself into one of those, you're going to go, why am I thinking about that restaurant in Maryland? It's been a dozen years since I've been there, and maybe even then you're not going to know. Well, why not set your scene there?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
And one of the things that happened in Lee's class was we had Jodie Foster's producer come in one day. And she said, I'm going to give you a writing assignment. You're going to write for 2 minutes. Your pen is not going to leave the paper. You're just going to write continually, whatever comes to mind, but you cannot stop. So write for 2 minutes, and here it is the two friends, one meets the other, one has a secret and will not share it. Okay? So I guarantee you a scene's going to come out of that.
Yeah. So once you get into this space, and that's funny because I recorded earlier a session for the International Dublin Writers Festival that's starting September 11th, and I was talking about mindfulness tools for authors. So what you're saying, like walking and kind of clearing or getting out of your way, like the conscious mind and connecting to the deeper self. I was talking about it earlier, so that's really interesting.
Yes, and of course, meditation takes you there.
Yeah.
And going back to Erickson, that was actually one of his mantras, if you will, and again, it connected to, they called him a hypnotist, but he claimed that there were all kinds of levels of trance, and that any attention span you have, anytime you are not in the room, anytime you're in your head, anytime you are having a fantasy, anytime you're tripping, you're in a trance state. Your subconscious, if you will, if that's the term, is fully alert and taking in and listening, and also able to express. So whatever is coming out, whatever is coming up for you at that time. And in these preacher stories, my main character is this is not Christian fiction. Okay, this is not a moral lesson. My main character is a guy who dropped out of divinity school. He studied astrophysics. He dropped out of that. He doubts his own beliefs and faith all the time, and yet he still works as a guest preacher to make a couple of bucks. But people come to him with problems because there's a rumor in this small town he can work miracles. Well, he can't work miracles, of course, but he does, because he's got one of these inquiring minds and an incessant curiosity, and he's also something of a data driller. Is he can get answers after the sheriff has closed the case. Okay, so I mean, in the genre of book publishing, that's called an amateur sleuth, and that was most of Agatha Christie's stories was, nice blue-haired lady, who just happens to be at the scene of a crime. It's an old formula, but and you can get away with a lot because you don't really have to be an expert on police procedure, because your investigator is not an expert. Your investigator is just one half a step ahead of the reader in terms of investigative skill, and Another parallel that I like is John le Carré, and his, these are spy stories, but the term that he uses for a spy is close observer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a close observer, when you think about it, is exactly what a reader is. So I believe, and at least from my experience and my enjoyment of John le Carré novels, is in telling you spy stories, he teaches you how, as a reader, to be a close observer.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
teaches you how to pay attention to detail. And by doing so, he's able to engage you with stories of great cleverness and subtlety, because on other readers that are maybe used to reading pulp fiction where, the clues are dropped with a thud, he can tell you some very sophisticated and Byzantine stories. I mean, his plots are often they're about false flag operations, which of course he totally disapproves of, and I think many thinking people would, is we think the enemy's doing this, and it's actually our own side doing it to trick the enemy, but half the time they trick us or they trick themselves. So, they're very complicated plots. But yes, the close observer, and you pay attention to every detail.
But I think a good author, a good writer, has to be a close observer in everyday reality. You need to be really pay attention to everything that's around you, and then you take it in. It goes into your subconscious, and then at the right moment, it pops up. And
you're taking notes even when you think you're not. I mean, yes, of course. I mean, le Carré always talked about he's traveling in Southeast Asia, and he's in these war zones, and he's scribbling in his notebook. But even if you haven't taken notes, if you put yourself back in that restaurant in Maryland 12 years ago, and you start describing the situation, okay, you might be inventing some details, but they will be details that, I can't remember. What was the bar marble, or was it varnished hardwood? Oh, maybe it was walnut. Oh, it had a real gloss on it. Okay, as you do that, you're opening yourself up to all those details where, okay, the things that you fictionalize may be things that your subconscious is slipping in there, and you won't know why. And as an author, I think you trust that, somehow this is either going to be significant later, or maybe I'll go back and I'll just, this was a sidetrack, I'll edit it out. But I think also, and this is something that all authors do, and fiction and nonfiction, is, you get to the end. It's much more difficult to write the first chapters of a book than it is to write the latter chapters. The first third of a book almost always gets rewritten in many different ways.
I agree.
And one of the reasons is that when you get to the end, you realize that there are certain seeds you have to plant in order for those things to blossom. So you do what I used to call it backward integration. Is I've got to go and I've got to, if the main character is going to use a gun, God forbid, okay, we've got to somehow show in an earlier scene, A, that he has one, and B, that he knows how to use it. Okay, so we've got to have some target practice. We're going to see him load it. We have to see him go on a hunting trip. We have to see something. Or along with a speech of, I hope I'll never have to use it, or,
something like that.
Because there's just way too much violence everywhere these days.
Do still authors need to outline, although they use their subconscious mind?
You say, do they need to outline?
Yeah, that controversy between, or the antagonist between.
I think you can have a skeleton. I know kind of where I want to end up.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Preacher, the third Preacher book is going to be called, I believe, Preacher Raises the Dead. And it's going to be about euthanasia. So somebody's going to go into coma, and there's going to be a controversy about whether they should be put on life support. Okay, and of course there'll be religious questions and medical questions, and as a preacher, he'll be called upon. He'll be expected to have opinions, and then near-death experiences. Is there life after death, preacher? I mean, if we pull the plug, is this the end for her? Or what are the consequences? Or should we let her experience sunlight on her face, even though that's the only thing that she can experience at this point? Or is she experiencing that? So here are these issues that are very much on the leading edge these days. And yet they're coming out simply because I've asked this question of, okay, if I were thought to be a thought leader or a religious leader in a small town where there's everything from well-educated people to people who believe in the most incredible kind of superstition, demonic possession, for example, or all the, how about this latest thing about, politicians eating babies? Well, I got news for you. If you study your history, the Romans accused Christians of eating babies, and the Christians accused Jews of eating babies in the first century. Okay, so we have certain lies that gain traction no matter how many thousands of years have elapsed. So that's as political as I'll get today.
Okay, and we are kind of getting close to the end of this episode, so we kind of need to wrap it up. But before doing that, and telling our viewers where they can find you online and where they can buy your books, what would be your top, let's say, 3 tricks that you can give authors to help them access their subconscious more easily or use it in their writing?
Well, as I say, ask yourself a question. Whether it's about the premise, what should this be about, or who's involved, or where are they going, or what kind of story. Ask yourself a question and sleep on it. Take a walk. Go walk in the woods by the beach. Just take a nap. Find a way for your subconscious to open up. The second thing I would say is get out of your own way. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because the things that you think are mistakes may not be. It's all about the editing. Okay. Now, I don't believe that you should write endlessly and then go back and just hack everything up. I don't believe that writing is editing or necessarily rewriting. I think that it's possible for you to maintain a fair amount, especially once you find out where it's going. And then that would be the third thing, is once you've got characters established, once they're on the page, once they're talking to each other, let them talk. Let them act, because you will find the character is going to want to do things that and this I found out as an actor, that there were aspects of my personality I had no idea I could be such a jerk.
Me neither. I don't believe you, Gerald. I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
I love it when you talk dirty.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a joy and so informative as always to get a chance to talk to you and learn more about what makes your books such a great read and what inspires you. So I would like you to tell our viewers where they can find you, where they can get your books. And
yes, well, my author blog, my personal website for authors is GeraldEverettJones.com, And there you're going to find my book list. You're going to find my latest rants and raves. Then if you're interested in advice for your own writing career and support, getpublishеdradio.com has got all our episodes on it, and you can also subscribe through iTunes and wherever else. All our episodes are there, and there's 3 years of episodes there.
Yeah.
So yeah, those two places, GeraldEverettJones.com if you want to read, and Get Published Radio if you'd like to hear me spout.
Yeah, that's I mean, that would be, I highly recommend.
And you were on our show. You were a
Yeah.
great guest. We talked about relationships and your books and your generosity of spirit, which really comes through it was the microphone back then.
Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate your kindness and your words and your support.